The Golden Crystal by me. The first book I ever wrote. A long time ago, too, now. 2012, I think, is when this one was published. And it started everything. It started the beginning of my writing career. It was never intended to be something I sold, really. I mean, it was something that I thought I wanted to do for fun. Oh, well, let me back up. It was originally written for my dad. My granddad had passed away, and he and my dad both were thriller readers. They were fans of Michael Crichton, of Dan Brown, Clive Cussler, and we used to trade paperbacks all the time. Whenever they'd go on trips, they'd dump some back at home, and I had boxes of these things that I would just plow through and read, and I loved them. And I always thought, I could write a book. I mean, how hard could it be? I mean, it's just you tell a story and people die, and it's fun and exciting and fast paced, and then you sell 1 million copies and you're rich. And I was a little naive back then, of course, but that's really what I thought. I thought, hey, if I can just put my nose to the grindstone and start typing, eventually I'll have a book. Back up to 2011. I'm sitting in my apartment with my wife, brand new wife at the time. Was it 2012? I'm not sure when we got married. I think it was 2011. It's 2011, and I'm on an airplane going to Colorado with my soon-to-be wife. And I remember sitting in the seat in the airplane thinking to myself, here's your chance to start writing a book. You've got a 2-hour flight and a computer and nothing else to do. So I did. I opened up the computer, the laptop, and I started typing in Microsoft Word or something, and I wrote the first couple scenes of what was going to become the Golden Crystal. Now, as poignant as that memory may be, the truth is I wrote those 2 chapters and came home from that trip to Colorado and just had no idea what to do. I had these 2 chapters that were essentially trash, and they didn't make any sense. There was no coherence to them. I mean, one of them was the prologue, so set back in the early days of the American country as it was being founded, and then the next one was some guy driving in the back mountain streets in New Mexico and flies off the road and is like zapped by some weird sci-fi gun. It was just absurd. But I said, you know what, this is it. This is the book. This is what it's going to be. I don't know how it's going to fit together, but it's going to fit together. So I kept writing, and I kept writing, and I kept writing, and pretty soon I realized there's no way it's going to fit together. I got to what I now know as the muddy middle, is what we writers call it. And it's this part towards the middle of any novel where it just starts to feel mushy. It starts to feel like none of this is going to make any sense. I don't really get where this is going. I took some time off at that point. I think maybe 3 to 4 months even. I remember it being the middle of the year. I had my wedding coming up with my wife, and obviously that was a busy time, and the honeymoon and all that. And I came back, and I slowly just tried to read as much as I could about how to write a book. I read everything I could about structure, about how to build a plot, about how to write characters well. I don't know that any of it stuck. I don't know that any of it worked in my mind, but it was there. It started to make a little bit more sense. At the very least, I understood a little bit more about structure of a novel, of a story, the beginning, middle, end, the 3-act play, as we call it. And so I was able to at least push through and write 100,000 or so words that became the Golden Crystal. Now, at the time I finished it, it was horrendous. I mean, it was this poorly plotted, terrible cardboard characters. The structure was barely there. The pacing was completely off. I mean, it was just typo laden, it was the worst thing you could imagine. But here's what happened. I had started a blog a few years prior that I was going to do like the life hacking Tim Ferriss thing, whatever, and that was going to be my thing. And as I had started writing this novel, I started blogging about the novel. I started talking about it and saying, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm trying to learn. And it became this, apparently a cry for help, because one day somebody answered and wrote back and said, hey, I'm an air traffic controller about to embark on a second career. I think I might do editing, writing, that sort of thing. I would love to edit your book for free if you just give me a good testimonial when the time comes. This man's name was Mike, and he has been a really close friend ever since. And he did a bang up job. I mean, he just rescued the book 100%. He took the story and fixed the pacing, the tone. He messed with my dialogue enough that it actually made sense. It sounded like people talking rather than a terrible author trying to be a slightly less terrible author. And he essentially just whipped the book into shape so that when I presented it to my dad on Christmas morning, it wasn't just a vanity thing. It was actually something that I could be proud of. And he looked at it and he unwrapped it, knew it was a book, I think, because you can kind of feel it. And okay, great, it's another book. And it was hardcover. I had it printed at Lulu, I think, at the time. And he took it out, and it was this nice cover that I had a friend of mine. I worked with this designer at the company I worked for, and I paid her to design the cover, and she did a wonderful job as well. And he unwrapped it, and he said, "Awesome, a new book. It looks good. I can't wait to read it." And I remember my mom looking at him and looking at the book and seeing my name at the bottom. I don't think he had seen, And she said, "Well, look who wrote it." And he looked down and he said, "Holy shit, you wrote this?" And that was the beginning. That was it. That was the Golden Crystal, and it just sort of sparked this interest in me for writing more books. As I plodded through this thing, as I plodded rather than plotted through this book, I had all these ideas, and I thought, I'm never going to write a book again, ever. So I got to put all these ideas into this one thing. I got to get it all down. And of course, they didn't all fit. And so I kept what I called at the time my swipe file, which was an Evernote document or an Evernote folder of all these ideas that I thought. There was like this weird sea cockroach thing I discovered on Wikipedia one day. So I threw that into the folder. I had this idea of this weird research station hidden underwater that didn't make it into the novel. So I threw it into this idea folder. And so as I gave my dad that book on Christmas morning, I realized I need to start writing the next book. I need to start doing this all over again. Because I had learned that I didn't just like writing, I liked the process of creating. I liked this idea of controlling a project from beginning to end and just seeing it birth into the world, that this book that didn't exist before. Everything from the cover design to the editing to the layout. I mean, at the time I was using InDesign and setting up a book template, and it was just a nightmare, but I loved doing it. And so I embarked on the journey of writing the next book, and the next book, and the next book. And then now here we are about a decade later, where I have a full-time job writing books and creating these pieces of fiction. I'm not going to say they're masterpieces by any stretch, but they're a lot of fun, and I think the readers really enjoy them. But I get to create worlds for a living. And it all started by writing down these weird ideas that were incoherent and didn't quite make sense, and just kind of forcing them to fit together like they were some sort of puzzle pieces. And then seeing my dad's face and just experiencing the joy of being able to say, I made this for you, and it was so much fun, I'm going to do it again and again and again. That's how the Golden Crystal came to be. Now, if you're listening to this in 2021, which is when I'm recording it, you won't be able to find the Golden Crystal on any store, because I have since rewritten it and relaunched it as a new title. It's actually called the Atlantis Stone, which is a little bit more indicative of what the book's about. And so I've given it another cover, and I've changed the name. I've actually rewritten and reworked a lot of this stuff, not because of Mike and his editing, but because of my writing. And so as I've grown as a writer, I've gone back and sort of fixed some of the plot areas that didn't quite make sense. Some of the things that were a little too out there, too fantastical for my relatively grounded modern, science fiction type thing, and relaunched it. And so if you are interested in seeing or hearing what that is, you can find that on Amazon. You can find that in bookstores. In addition, I'm also doing something kind of weird, kind of new. If you're into audio, you can, of course, find the audiobook narrated by another guy named Mike, but not the same Mike. He did a fantastic job with it, and that's available wherever you can find audiobooks. But I'm also doing something that I haven't quite seen done before, and that is I am custom scoring some compositions that go beneath the audiobook that play simultaneously. And then I'm taking all of that and releasing them for free as a podcast. You can find out what I'm talking about a little bit more at adventureexplosion.com. I'll put a link up here. Go check it out. I think it's pretty cool. It's kind of a different thing, and it's a way to experience the book in a whole new medium. All right, that's enough for me for this Behind the Book episode number 1. I will see you hopefully next week.